Hi, good morning, everyone. So I'm really glad that I'm sharing a stage with two unicorns today. So just now, Hui Jing said that she's going to speak with like a half British, half Singaporean accent, but I'm going to go all out Singaporean accent. So I'm from Singapore. So if you are from out of town, welcome to Singapore. It's the weather these few days are not bad. It's actually a lot hotter on other days. Yeah, wow, so many people. Okay, so my name is Yishu. I'm a software engineer at Carousel. So what Carousel is? Okay, this is how our website look like. It's actually a place where users get to buy and sell directly from each other. So yeah, a little similar to eBay, I guess. Yeah. So what people do on Carousel is that they get to buy limited edition goods, usually, and then sometimes they buy Avengers footage from other people before, so that they can watch before their friends spoils them. So I realized that there's only one bullet point, which is a bit weird, so I'm going to put a second one. I got myself an electrical engineering degree before starting my career as a software engineer. So usually when people ask me like, can you tell me something about electrical engineering? And then I'll tell them, do you know how your keyboard works? They are not individual. They are individual buttons, but then the wires are crisscross. Yeah. So I'm currently working on the web platform at Carousel. This is an article that came out about half a year ago, October, more than that. Okay, so this is Stacy, who is our web team lead. He wrote down like how this project came about. So this project is like a Carousel-like. If you have seen like Twitter-like, we have a Carousel-like version, and then we only serve it to our mobile users. And there's only one goal in this light version, which is to make it as performant as possible. Okay, so I didn't plan for this, but then so 2 days ago, Alex Lacatos went to our office for a meetup, and then booms, he tried to like profile our website, and thank goodness he said it was a good performing website. Okay, so from we had embarked on this project because our previous code base was about 5 years old. It was showing a lot of signs of aging, and so the decision was then to halt all new features and then to concentrate. So every single engineers who was working on a web platform stopped our normal work to move on to work on this migration. And to engineers, this is just great news because we got to work on a complete new code base from scratch. And then we get to make design decision. And then because we were already working on the old code base, we know what are the features that we have. So we sort of have more of like a 20/20 hindsight to building this. And then we get to try new APIs. Yes. So, but it's not without problems. So today I'm going to share about some of the lessons that I've learned, and specifically pertaining to components. So throughout the history of web, we have always been trying to break our code up into pieces. So this is a chart of the journey. There's a lot of logo, I guess you can understand. PHP, server. So we try to break things up on the server. We try to do it on JavaScript with mustache, handlebar, and then, of course, there was Backbone. And then we move on to Angular, React, Vue today, and also web components. So what's that small logo at the bottom? Okay, let me zoom it in. Components. So today, everything is a component. If you like it, it's great. If you don't like it, everything is still a component. So component has become the de facto building patterns of front-end framework today. And depending on like the framework that you're using, or you are not using framework, the semantics is a bit different. So my favorite description of it, of what a component is that it has data, it has structure, and it has algorithm. So not this one, not this book, but separately, data, structure, and algorithm. So data, I think this is a bit, it's quite straightforward, we know. Like this is what the information this component contains. And you also have structure. So for web, to us, this is the DOM. And algorithm, algorithm is sometimes it's called methods, sometimes it's called functions. These are things that determine what this component can do. So a lot of the discussion about components usually bring up two concepts. So first concept is the single responsibility principle, which is that every single class, or every single module, or in our case, every single component in a program should have responsibility for just a single piece of that program's functionality. And the second concept that we usually talk about is composable, which is that the components can be selected and assembled in various combinations to satisfy the user requirement. Okay, so for today's talk, I will try to be as framework agnostic as possible, but then I like React a lot. If we can do everything with React, I would have done everything with React. So today's point of view is going to come from React, but then hopefully it can also apply to the different frameworks also. So for show of hand, over here, who uses React and like React? Oh my goodness! Thank goodness I was so afraid that everybody's going to say view. Oh. Okay. Okay. So I'm sure everybody is familiar with the concept of atomic design. So this is atomic design. This is not atomic CSS. I think as an industry, it's time for us to ask one of them to change the name because it's a bit too confusing. So using, in this concept of atomic design, we start with the smallest element, and they are atoms, and then we use them as building blocks to build bigger, larger building blocks, and then this larger building blocks is then used to make even larger building blocks. And then in our, in web, this is called a page, usually. And this is a really good concept that we can apply to start building a component library. So we start by sussing out across the different pages and what kind of components that we will reuse them over and over again. And then we start by building them. So if you have worked on a component library before, usually we'll start with button. We'll start with select. So this process is great because it's going to give you the look and feel of your site very, very quickly. Sometimes you think about like look and feel, you think, oh, this is how your card look like, or this is how your animation look like. But a lot of times it's actually determined by your font sizes, your font family, what kind of type scale you are using, what kind of color palette you are using. And this is very, it's going to come out very soon once you build your first button and you build your first like select component, or you style your first select component. So it's going to majorly influence how you build your component on the very lowest level. And so these are like the atoms, the one with Lego block. And then, so once you finish all this, you will think, okay, what's the next step? Should I build a card? Because every single website has a card. It's everywhere. So once I build, okay, I have my button, I have my select, I have my card, and I realize, oh, am I stuck? What do I build next? So I think, okay, the very common reusable components. One is a navbar. So every page has a navbar, but they always look the same. Okay, maybe not that usable. And then we have a footer. Okay, yeah. As long as you don't have infinite scrolling, users are gonna see your footer. And Okay, so I got myself my button, my select, my cut, my nav bar, my footer, and then I look at the design, and then I see, okay, this iPhone X, iPhone X 7 Plus PU looking thing. So this is our search result page, and then when you go into a search result page, most of the time we will try to suggest you other terms that we think you might be do you mean you want to search for iPhone 6 instead? So to me, this looks like a very reusable component. So I look deeper into our Zeppelin, and then I realized that there are actually variations to this component. There are different colors, and then there's one that has a close button. So the one on top works more like an anchor, because just now you see I'm on the iPhone page, and then when I click on it, I will go to iPhone 6 page. So it's like a navigation, but then the closed one is not going to navigate anywhere. So DOM-wise, it's going to be an anchor, and then the one below is probably going to be like a div wrapping a p tag, and then have a close button as a sibling. Like, oh, okay, this is actually a lot more complicated than what I was thinking in the first place. And the suggestion here is, don't solve imaginary problems. Because as engineers, we don't want our code to come back and bite us. So we try and design our APIs to keep it as flexible as possible. And then we need to preempt a lot, and we might end up preempting for a problem that will never ever happen, or we leave a room for an API that we'll never gonna create later on. So it's in our code guideline, which is also known as I'm not gonna approve your PR, that you shouldn't be solving for imaginary problems. And I'm gonna coin the term here, instead, is to tackle your components outside in. In this approach, instead of going from bottom upwards, like how atomic design is, we're going to do it very similar to how we have always built HTML, which is from top to the bottom. So top level, we will have the page. You start with a blank page, you start filling up the spaces. You put in your header, you put in your left sidebar, you put in your right main body, and you're going to realize that this whole page component, this one single component, is going to be really, really big. Don't worry about that. We'll get to that on how to breaking them up. So first step is, while you are building, you will realize that sometimes there are things that you'll go, that actually should have been a library. And this is going to very commonly come up as like pagination, tooltip, error messages, or like a localized date label. So this kind of thing, when you are building your page, you'll be like, actually, this one, somebody should have done it, right? So this is when you will realize that, okay, this is where I need to break it up into a component. We have a text component in our code base. It's going to sound very weird, because you'll be like, isn't that just a p tag? What we have encapsulated in this component are functions and style that will make our life easier. So for example, what will happen if you overflow? Should you put like the ellipses, the 3 dot? Should you support multi-line? Should you only support single line? These are things that we actually built it into our text component, so that once you use it, you stop having to worry about it. So in fact, we have built a lot of components in our component library that are like this. They sound like HTML element. Button, input, text, anchor, they all sound like HTML element. But what we did was to put a lot of functionality into it that makes your life easier. Every time you think, oh, it should have been solved by someone else, it have been solved by all these components. And this is where I'll recommend starting your component library. So on a side note, iterate often. Because of the outside-in approach, you're going to realize that sometimes you're going to miss something out. So for example, our error message here, we missed it out. We built it as part of our page, the big page component. But then actually, they are happening quite often, and they should be components on their own. So It's okay that you missed it out the first time around, because each time retroactively you try and make them into components, it's a very comfortable detoxing process. So this is our page component. It looks a bit short because they have been broken up into different render functions. So now is because now we have, so what we have now is actually our component library. They're very small components, and then we have this big page component. What is our next guideline to start breaking it up? Don't make it awkward. I want to name this technique, don't make it awkward. So this is code that is a little bit awkward. Over here, we check that we should load more, and then previously we didn't load more, then now we should load more. And then there's a query, no query, don't load. Only then we ask for, oh, so this is actually just now that peels. These are all the checking that we've done. So this is the old code that we have where we check before we will load the peel. After we read the refactoring, we actually move the peels out into a component by itself, and we only call for the API on did mount. So this is then checked by over on the top. So the parent component will choose whether to, so it's like a this or now. So only when you have something, load it, and then inside the component, it will say, okay, I will ask for the data myself. So it's a bit clearer. So when you want to split a component, a good gauge is to split it along your data lines. Because the closer your data is to your component, the easier things will be. After all, a lot of our work is actually to translate data into interface. And a lot of our apps today are very data-driven. And data itself is very guided by information architecture. Although we are all front-end dev, and then we don't trust back-end dev, but I believe they do their work also. They will split their data properly, just like how we will split our data properly. So use it as a hint. Each time you realize that this is going to be a different model, this is going to be a different endpoint, it's a good time where you split things up. So most of the time, your one page is not going to be just one single API call. It's going to be 5. Use that as a chance to split it into 5 separate components. And then if, let's say, one API returns you an array of listings, use that chance to realize that you can have you can split them up into all small listing card components. Sometimes you will realize that your data doesn't match how things look because, sometimes the designer and the backend dev don't work too well, so you get stuck in the middle. Use a data adapter. So a data adapter can happen, it can be like a util function. So you can do it after you fetch, or right at the point where you retrieve your data out from your store. So they are actually functions where you will transform how information came in from backend to how it should look on the front end. Try not to do it on your component itself because this functions is going to be called every single render, and you know that this transformation just have to happen one single time. So do it right after you fetch it from your API, or do it right at the point where you get it from your store. Okay, so this is the type definition of one of our components. I actually didn't count how many prompts there are. It's still in our code base, I'm sorry. So very aptly coined, this is called an apocalypse. So of course, I don't think any one of us as engineers, we want to design things in this way. But this component has grown so big as we add more and more features. And okay, so let me show you how it looks like. Okay, so this is our input text. It's quite a monster. So there's error message. If you take it out, there's no error message. And then there's a label. So you see, like when you click on it, the label will move up. Wow. And then there's also a placeholder at the same time. And then there's also a prefix. Sometimes you don't need a prefix, so you can take it out. We have different sizes to cater to different use case. And then sometimes you can, okay, this doesn't work at the same time with error. So, and then you can disable it. Then you cannot type in it anymore. Okay, so you see that actually some of the props work with each other very well. Like if you have an icon left and an arrow, okay, probably there's a use case for it. A key down and a placeholder, probably there's a use case for it. But sometimes the prop doesn't work with each other. Like you have an auto capitalize with a type equals to tel. It's like, what's happening here? So therefore, like there are two props. It's very weird, isn't it? Like because there are two props on the same element, but they will never work well with each other. But to a engineer, when you come in, you're like, actually they are all text input one, so I should just extend on my text input. And you realize that actually a lot of the props are optional. This is how we like to make ourselves feel better. Like, okay, they're optional, just I use it, nobody else use it. But then why do you want to put in the same component? If they are separate, split them. Create a new component. Don't be shy about creating new components. There are actually ways in React that lets you do this, so that you can extend on a base class, and then you can have like a telephone input text that's a auto capitalized input text. Okay, sure. But then one thing that will work across different framework is to then split them. Create a new component, even if there's going to be duplicate code. No, don't be shy about having duplicate code. Of course, all of us come from the framework of clean code, but then clean code at the expense of like making it difficult to use. So the apocalypse is a monster, it's a Frankenstein creature, because all of us, we have so many web engineers, all of us are going to add on to the code base thinking that it's going to affect me. But someone else is going to join the team, they're going to come in, and they're going to see your component with 20 props, and they will be like, who wrote this? So I'm going to end off my talk with this tweet that I just saw yesterday. Most of my ideas are just not repeating previous mistakes. And I think a lot of us, we come and we listen to podcasts, we come to a conference thinking that there's going to be some words of wisdom. But I realized that a lot of time, guidelines is just one person's pain, and then they don't want to repeat that pain anymore. So every one of you will have a guideline that you want to share. So please share and make this community more knowledgeable. Okay, thank you.